inspirations or invitations that the oak tree has shared with me over the years, just in terms of observing the oak tree in the forest and in the ecosystem. And from this experience and spending time with nature and time with the acorns, it's almost like I've experienced my own learning initiation. And the four themes that emerged from this were connection, community, collaboration, and celebration. And these four themes are the four themes that are at the center, the core principles of the Acorn Project. The Acorn Project is a non-for-profit organization. We've just had our new board recently appointed, and I guess it's organized, the organization itself is organized around these principles of connection, community, and collaboration. And it delivers nature-based learning programs to 12 schools along the Nore. And but just before I kind of begin to tell you more about the Acorn Project, I'd like to just begin with the origins of the Acorn Project. And the story begins in Scotland. What I've been finding over the last few years of working with acorns is that there seems to be this inextricable link between acorns and story. And this story begins in Scotland. After a visit to an oak woodland on the Ardnamurchan Peninsula in Scotland in 2016, the vision for the Acorn Project was born. And I wasn't there by accident. I had visited Scotland, especially to visit the Arundel forest. A friend had told me about this forest, and there was something that she said, and I can't even remember what it was, but it just drew me to the forest. It was something about the color of the soil. And I'd never quite been in a forest like this in terms of its maturity and the openness of the forest. And I guess I didn't have the eco-literacy. I didn't have a reference frame point to match it up with. But what struck me most about the forest was how close to the sea that the oak trees grew. And this image of the oak leaves reaching out and touching the salty waters awakened something inside me. When I returned home, I just kept revisiting this image of the oak leaves and the salty water. And I kind of started to experience this longing for the possibility that we could have forests on this land, where the oak leaves might reach down to touch the salty waters. And this became the vision for the Acorn Project, that the oak leaves may touch the salty waters. The River Nore runs alongside the woods that I run forest school in. And it wasn't very long before I started contemplating the relationship between the river and the sea, and the river and the sea and the oak, and how the oak traveled with the river down towards the sea. And my sense of place and how I was connected to my landscape just began to shift. I began to understand place in terms of oaks and rivers instead of roads and maps. I began to visit different oak trees and oak woodlands around Kilkenny, and soon began to realize that what connected these woodlands and these different places was their connection to the River Nore and its tributaries. At the same time, I was a teacher of the senior class in Two Teachers School in Kells in County Kilkenny. And I shared my ideas and longings for forest restoration with my class. Now, one of the reasons that I really love working with children and with young people is that they don't see obstacles, they don't get daunted by the enormity of a task. So when I suggested that as a Green Schools project that we could start working on restoring Ireland's Atlantic rainforests, they were really up for it. And the 4th-class girls set about putting an action plan in place. And step 1 was to start to collect the acorns. And that's how it began. That year, we decided that we'd try to collect acorns from every county in Ireland. So we did a call out on social media for people to post us their acorns and to include a story about the place that they had collected them from. So the postman didn't really know what was going on. All these envelopes with acorns started arriving, and we started mapping them and just matching up the stories and the place names. And that's how it began, as a really simple mission, a 2,000-year project to restore the oak forests of the land acorn by acorn. And in doing this, we would restore our human relationship with nature. Since then, the Acorn project has been delivered in 12 different schools with our team of 3 forest school leaders. And it's just traveling along the Nore as it goes down. And one of the I'm just showing you a picture here of the Recovery Project, which is a supported art studio in Kilkenny, and they create our acorn boxes for our tree nurseries. But I suppose looking at this relationship with oak and humans, it's not a new one. All throughout our history and all across cultures, the oak tree, like many other trees, has had a potent significance within human culture. And through the ages, the oak has been associated with kingship, with kinship, with as a gathering tree, where communities would come together and make decisions. And this is still a living tradition in northern Spain. When you visit the cities, the council always have an oak tree growing. I spent a day in the National Archives a couple of years ago reading and researching about the references to oak in our archive. And it was just fascinating to read all that had been collected and written down at the turn of the 20th century, all this tacit knowledge. One word that I came across really stayed with me, daróg. And daróg was defined as an oak tree under the age of 7. I began to imagine, what would it be like to live in a world, in a society, where there's a specific word for an oak tree under 7. Daróg, a word which evokes just such tenderness and speaks of a human relationship to nature that is one of tending and guardianship. Another story I came across was of Dean Kecht. Dean Kecht was the great physician and healer and herbalist to the Tuatha Dé Danann, his name meaning swift restoration. And an entry collected in Cavan tells how the followers of Dean Kecht always carried acorns in their pocket. I wonder if the acorns just signified for them the power to restore. As a child, like a lot of children, I carried an acorn or hazelnut in my pocket. And over the last couple of years, I've renewed this practice again. It seems somehow human intuition to want to have this connection with acorns. I'm always wowed by how they hold everything that they need for their own growth and nourishment. Another story that echoes this carrying of acorns and this connection was a story that was shared to me by Cathal McFarlane, who works at the Recovery Project. And Cathal told me how the story of the twin oaks, which some of you may have heard, where a giant set off on a long journey and an acorn in each hand, he followed the raindrops until these raindrops turned into a stream, and traveled the land until he got tired and he lay down and slept for 2,000 years. And from each hand grew an acorn that turned into a giant oak. And then he woke up. So it's this waking up part that I'm always really interested. And there's something about this story that captures the spirit of what the Acorn Project is trying to achieve. Sometimes I imagine the giant following the river, and sometimes I think of the Acorn Project as being that giant, waking and setting off, following the river on a journey to plant acorns. And I'm just going to show you just a little map here, just to give you an idea of where the journey that the Acorn Project takes. So it's just coming up on screen there now. Let me know if you can. So you can see here, I'll just collapse that down. I'll just zoom out a little bit. You can see here where the Acorn Project starts, where at the Devil's Bit in County Tipperary, and it travels down along the course of the Nore, traveling through Laois and coming down into Durrow and Rathdowney towards Ballyragget and Freshford and on to Kilkenny, and then leaving and coming down to South Kilkenny. And you can see here the acorns on the map are the different schools and communities that we've worked with so far on the project. So that's just to give you kind of a an idea of that journey that the river is taking. And sometimes our collective connection to oak can be signified a lot in our place names and our stories and our myths, and it's scattered across our language, hiding in words like acre, which originally denoted how many acorns you could harvest from a measure of land. And this helps us to remember the importance of the acorn as a wild food for our ancestors. And I'm just going to show you now a video. If we were in Kinvara, I would probably be sharing a cup of acorn coffee with you, and you'd be enjoying it with all your senses. But I'm just going to show you this video. I'll stream it now, and hopefully I can just share the screen with you. I'll also pop it in the chat. If it's not coming through for you, then you can just click on the link.
I'm always really inspired by acorns, and I always carry one in my pocket because it helps me to remember that we all have what we need for our own nourishment and growth, just like an acorn. Acorns have been used as a food source for millennia by humans all across the world. But as you find them on the ground, they're not edible. So we're going to have a look at how we can process acorns to make them edible, and we're going to make some acorn coffee. Acorns have been used by humans for millennia as a food source, and they're really nutrient rich, containing calcium, magnesium, carbohydrates, proteins, and even vitamin B. So how do we make acorns edible? Well, the first thing that we need to do is remove the tannins. Acorns contain really high levels of tannins. I prefer to do a cold bleaching process. It takes a little bit more time, but it means that the nutritional value of the acorns is just better. So basically what I've done here, I've taken my acorns, I've put them in a net, and I've put this net in a stream of running water for about 5 days. And that washes away your tannins.
I think we're having some connectivity issues, Maura.
Are we, will I share it in the chat, or do you want to try sharing it from your screen, Grania?
I've just shared it in the chat. So if anybody wants to, if people want to go in and click on the link in the chat, it's on the YouTube channel, Farm Bio Trust YouTube channel. And if you just go in about a minute and a half, I think that's where we started to get the lag. So we will maybe give 3 minutes for people to, 3.5 minutes, say, for people to go and have a look at the recording.
Great, thanks, Grania.
Back to us. That was lovely, Maura. I just finished. I started at 1 minute and a half and I just finished now. So I think the other participants should be finishing up.
Great. I might just leave it a few more seconds because I think that someone sent me that they're just starting to watch it, if that's okay.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. We'll be expecting a cup the next time I'm in Kilkenny.
Great. So I hope everybody got to look at it, and maybe if you didn't, the link is there anyhow, you can look at it later. So just moving on then, and just recapping, I suppose, the main point there, just kind of looking then at the importance and the value as practitioners in our own nature connection and intending to that nature connection, and looking towards the emergent curriculum that can develop from this practice of nature connection.
Maura, I might get you to just put on your camera.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. So I've shared my screen there. Can you see my screen okay, Grania?
Yeah, we can.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so just recapping on that, the importance then to us as practitioners in outdoor learning or in learning of any sort, intending to our nature connection as a tool and as a source of sharing that with the learners, and how looking at how this emergent nature-based curriculum can inspire learners to become nature guardians and initiate learner-led action in ecological restoration. So looking just what that kind of means in terms of the Acorn project as an organization. So I'm going to focus really on our learning project. So we deliver a forest school program, and the forest school program is a minimum of 4 forest school sessions, and they are based on the themes of connection, community, and collaboration and celebration. And the school picks a class themselves that they would like to participate in the program, and we go. I suppose the program is different in each iteration. It's like it shape shifts from place to place, responding to the stories of the land, the landscape itself, and the humans that we meet as well. So in that sense, the program, it's never the same twice, even though it has these connecting core principles of connection, community, and collaboration and celebration, which the program is based on. So each class will then go to their local wild space or their local woods and take part in these 4 forest school sessions. They will also then establish a tree nursery in their school using acorns that we've collected in their local woods. Now, it kind of varies how that's organized, basically changing with the seasons. So if you're a school that's taking part in the autumn, you'll go out and you'll harvest your own acorns. And then if you're a school that's taking place later in the winter or in the early spring, we'll try to team you up with an organization in your locality who might have went out on a seed saving mission back in autumn. So that's kind of how it works. And it's that kind of collaboration between schools, between community organizations, and between the Acorn project that's really at the center of what we're trying to do. And we can see that again then on our just some of the organizations and groups that we have been collaborating with, like Keep Kilkenny Beautiful, some of the Tidy Towns organizations in Freshford and Inishtig and Kells, and some of the collaborations with partners like the Nor Vision Project, which is a recently founded river trust in Kilkenny, and Kilkenny County Council and Canis's Credit Union have allowed us to bring the Acorn project to 12 schools. So I think we went from the first year delivering the project in 2 schools, and now we're in 12. So it's the support of organizations that allow us to do that, and that support and collaboration is really important to the project, as well as working with creative organizations like Monkey Shine, the Recovery Project, which I mentioned earlier, who make our Acorn boxes, the Butler Gallery, and delivering some training programs for teachers through the Education Centre. And really, that's really an important part of the project as well, because connecting with the teachers and building that community of educators and raising the awareness around the Acorn project and Forest School kind of really helps in that collaboration as well. And a lot of the teachers who take part in the training, in CPD training with the Education Centre in Forest School, then go on to be participating schools. And so I guess the aims of the project are really quite simple. We just want to get people out into their local wild spaces, connecting with their local wild spaces, and through the learning framework of the Acorn project, inspiring participants to take action in their local landscape. And I guess what that looks like in terms of a practical application is that we will generally work maybe with the school for the 4 weeks, and part of that project will also see us working with other organizations in the community or connecting in with them. Like we often get support from maybe a Tidy Towns organization and finding a location in their community to place one of our Acorn boxes. So participating communities are invited to engage in growing trees from local heritage seed that is collected in the autumn on seed saving days in the local woodlands. And these seeds are then used for our tree nurseries. And once our trees then grow to maturity, we collaborate again with our community organizations in planting the trees. And also we have a site in North Kilkenny that we plant them on as well. And from the very start of the project, we kind of identified that it wasn't just about planting trees, that we needed to create a community of nature guardians who would be the future guardians of those forests and those trees. So that's where the learning program comes in and where the well-being programs come in. So through the 4 themes of connection and community, collaboration and celebration, our aim is to inspire and engage learners. And I suppose we're just going to take a little closer look at those ideas of connection, community, collaboration, and celebration. I feel like I'm repeating those words a lot, but they really are at the center of what we do. And this has kind of come as it's designed to be an emergent curriculum, meaning that it's got space around it for the learners to learn from their environment, and it's child-led. And these 4, I've come to call these 4 themes an ecology of learning. And for me, the journey that the learner is taking is almost one where each time we go out into the woods, we're going a little bit further into the woods. And that's actually how we lay the program out. So on the first day, for instance, we might meet them at the edge of the wood, and each session will go a little bit further in. And as we do, we're developing through these themes of connection, community, collaboration, celebration. And each of these themes has kind of a corresponding place in ecology as well. Like connection, we equate with the acorn landing on the ground and that initiation of the first sprout of an acorn. And that's where the connection is happening. And then community, we equate with the mycelium layer and the connections in the community and the communication that's happening. And collaboration is kind of the part of the oak tree, like the branches, where you might find other mammals climbing through the branches, and where the tree is offering home and habitat to these creatures and to other living things. And celebration then reaches up into the canopy. And it's that idea of just the leaves the tree in full leaf, and that idea of celebration and summer. So just coming to the idea of connection and what that translates to in terms of the learning approaches that we take and the learning activities that we do. And a big part of what we do in the first session of connection is mapping these connections. So when we look at the idea of mapping, we are looking at 3D maps where we're inviting people to step onto the map. So it's not just like our traditional idea of what a map is, but we're inviting participants to step onto the map and create a 3D map. So we would ask them, we would like place an object on the ground to signify the river and any other characteristic landscape features, like the forest itself, or if there was a hill or a mountain. And we would then invite participants to take a look around and to locate their home on this map and go stand in that place and shout out the name of their place. And they start to look at the landscape a little bit differently. We're plotting the school on the map, the river, their connection to the river, and where their home is in connection to the river and to the place. And it's that invitation to start looking at the land a little bit differently, and to begin understanding our human place in nature. And as the weeks go on, or as the time goes on, we will invite them to not just think of the human map, but we'll invite the other than human living things that we meet in the woods onto that map as well. And we'll follow the tracks and the trails in the woodlands and see who else is there and see their relationship and their connection. And we're also, I guess, connecting this back into the Acorn Map. And the Acorn Map is really just a kind of a project that's in its infancy, really. But it's designed to kind of look at that idea that, mapping, how we think of mapping can kind of shape the world that we live in. And if we bring different layers into that mapping process, our human cultural layers and a more ecocentric approach to mapping, that maybe how we step and how we live and walk in the world will change as well with that. So we're also as well trying to map our experiences using all the senses, and participants are guided through a number of different invitations to facilitate that. And nature itself just lends itself to that kind of sensory experience and sensory learning. Another way that we map is by the collecting of words. That's just like something that I found that just naming things gives them a value, and just connecting in with those names. And it's then just another opportunity to be reflecting back the learning to the learners and documenting the learning as we go, so that this documentation process, this mapping, becomes a learning resource and a way of making sense of the world and making sense of nature and helping to build that eco-literacy. So then moving on to that idea that we're coming into home and habitat, and mapping is just one way that we connect to nature. Other ways that we might do that are through story. And you can see here, these are some of the words that we've been collecting in what I call the book over the last 3 years, where children are invited to add a word to the book. And yeah, so story is another part of how we connect. And like the story that I mentioned earlier about the giant who set off with the 2 acorns, we're looking for these stories that kind of act as a guide and an inspiration and a connection to nature. And its story can just be really valuable tool in connecting that human and other than human world. Another way that always helps people to connect is through making of things in nature using natural materials and learning of traditional skills. And it's finding all these different ways that help people to connect, because every learner connects in a different way. And connecting then also can be done through making, through playing, and through creating. So we move on then, just kind of like always kind of emphasizing that within this framework, as it changes, we're leaving that space for it to be child-led and leaving the space for there to be opportunity for play and for games. And as we move through those connections and start to build those connections between the participants, between the participants and nature, between different organizations, and we begin sharing our stories and that shared experience. And I had this moment last autumn where I realized what community has come to mean to me. And community is, for me, that shared experience of when you're standing in the woods with a group of people. It's happened a few times last year, and it could be with a group of children or it could be with a group of adults, and someone just turns around and says, "Did you hear it?" And you did. And it was like the sound of an acorn dropping. And it was just something in the sharing of that intimate sensory experience of hearing the sound of an acorn dropping in the woods and sharing that experience with a group that really just made me understand what it means to be in a community. So yeah, just other things that we can have as shared experiences and that help to kind of create learning a context within this nature, within Forest School and within our nature connection programs, are that idea of adventure and shared journeys and heading off and sharing stories underneath the trees is something that we like to do as well. And finding like a home tree, an idea that there's a tree that we go back to share our stories, or a story tree. And learning new skills together is another way of developing community, learning to support each other through this learning of new tools and how to do this. And playing together, of course, is just another way of being in community. So after we have like established and built that community, we can now kind of step forth in collaboration and building and creating together. And this is kind of the point where participants become almost their own facilitator or their own teacher, and they step into that role of nature guardian. And this takes many shapes. And I suppose having contexts to collaborate in forest schools, such as shelter building or creating a project together, just strengthens that idea of community and collaboration. And again, this is another place where, another point of where we connect with and collaborate with other organizations, providing contexts then for citizen science. We've collaborated with Norvision, where we've, participants on our programs have engaged in their citizen science projects, where we kick sample and test for water quality, where we work on certain areas to manage the area for biodiversity, helping to clear Himalayan balsam as the Himalayan balsam travels along the river. Sometimes it takes over areas and other native plants and species can't grow. So we've worked in designating certain areas that we pick each year. And then, of course, our community seed saving, and where participants will gather the acorns and establish the tree nursery in their school. And this after this, we always move towards celebration. And that's kind of an opportunity to reflect on what has passed over the 4 sessions, to take in the learning, that tacit knowledge that we've received through our connection with nature and through the new skills that we have learned. And creating kind of, this is the time we would have the acorn coffee and the acorn biscuits. And like fire can just be such a valuable part of that as well. Fire just always seems to bring people together. And again, it's not like these steps of connection, community, collaboration are happening separate to one another. The stories and the community come into it all. And again, it's taking these journeys together, whether that's on the river or, just a smaller journey through the woods, and mapping and tracking and trailing that journey. And part of then, I'm just going to look at one school in particular, just to give an example of a project. And before I do this, I might just give people a moment to go and grab a pen and paper. So I'll just we're just going to do a little exercise here. So I'm just going to give you 1 minute maybe to go and find yourself a piece of paper and a pen, and we'll meet back in 30 or 60 seconds. Great. So I'm just going to share an audio piece with you now. This year, the Acorn Project travelled to Durrow in County Laois, and Durrow is on the Urkina flows through Durrow and just meets up with the Nore just past Durrow. So it was great to be going to Durrow, obviously called after the oak tree. So we really felt like we were at home here, and we were given a great welcome. You can see where we met the students actually on the school grounds, underneath their own oak tree. So that became kind of the home tree for the project. And as we spoke about that, like mapping the landscape and the different ways that we can do that, stepping onto the map and mapping the seasons and the elements, identifying all the other than human through mapping the plants, meeting different plants that they hadn't met before, like yarrow. It was just a whole meadow of yarrow that was still there late last autumn. And then mapping, using a sense mapping activity. So I'm going to invite you now into this sense mapping activity in a moment, just while the audio file is loading. I might just talk about the story collection itself. So we give participants what we call not homework, but heart work. And we give them the task to go into their community and collect a story from an elder. And we bring that story back in the second week, and we share it in lots of different ways. And again, it's about creating lots of different listener-speaker relationships. Like you might go tell your story to a tree, you might share it with just one person, you might share it with the entire circle, and then if you wish, you can go and record it at the story tree. And so they bring these stories, like they're some of the participants will like draw beautiful pictures for them as well and document them in lots of different ways. So I'm just going to share with you now an audio file, and I'm going to invite you, as I'm sharing this audio file, just to create your own map, your own sense map to the sounds that you hear and the sense that you get of Durrow. And if you can just record a symbol or a shape or a picture or an image or a word or whatever strikes you as you're documenting the stories that you're just about to hear, to give you a flavour of the land and the sense of place in Durrow. So I'm just going to share that now. And Grania, let me know if you can hear me okay when I click on it, please.
Will do.
Thanks a million.
Lucia. We're fourth class Durrow. In Durrow years ago, when my dad was my age, there were horse chestnut trees growing all the way along the River Erkina. The old stone bridge of Durrow was built in 1778, replacing a wooden bridge over the River Erkina. It was very hard to go over because it was narrow and it had a big hump. There are lots of lovely things to be seen. Now autumn is here, we can collect blackberries and hazelnuts.
Let's send one class. Just the one forward to Python.
So when my nanny worked in Stanley's, she was just doing her job, and then someone came in and he held her, and I saw her robbing her. So then she went down and kept taking out the 2s and the 5s and the 2s and I kept taking out all the 2s and 5s instead of the 10s and the 20s, and then he got really stressed out and ran away. My mom was on a horse when she was little. She broke her arm because the horse got stung and jumped up. My great granny lived in Granstown beside the lake, and she said the town of Granstown is under the lake, and on clear days when the sun is shining, you can see the chimneys of the houses. At the Tallyhole Bridge, the River Nore, there are otters, kingfishers, and the rarest of all, there is a freshwater bivalve mussel.
Do you remember on our walk down, we all recorded a little sound into our microphone? Yes. So I'm going to ask each person we're going to do the sound, a bit like we send the clap around, but when I do my sound, everybody's going to join in until it goes the whole way around to me.
The Flower family started to build Castle Durrow in 1712. It took 4 years to be built. This house was passed down along the Flower family for 214 years. When my mother was working in Castle Durrow for years, she often walked to and from work early in the morning and late at night. On one particular morning, my mom had to be in work earlier than usual. This was because it was the wedding of Keith Barry. While proceeding up the avenue, all of a sudden, she saw somebody proceeding through the courtyard with what looked to be a white dress. It was very early for hotel guests to be out around the castle. My mom followed in the direction of what looked to be a lady dashing through the wooden arches, and after she turned the corner, there was no sign of anybody. So at the Dunmore woods, on the side where you park, the white house is where my great nanny used to live with 15 children in there. Once upon a time, there's my granddad called the Dak, and he went to school in Aberlakes, and he got spanked by a teacher with a stick, and then he went home and he seen an injured fox, and then he went over to it and gave band-aids and everything and put it into a cage and fed it and everything. Then the next day he's playing outside with his brother Eugene. He's seen the fox with his family, and the fox went over to him and gave him a hug, and that's all.
Great. So I never tire of listening to the stories that we collect in Forest School, and it always just really kind of reiterates to me again how our personal stories intersect with nature so much, and how that really is part of our connection. So just to finish up, just really to kind of recap then on like the different approaches that we use in the project. The project is largely based on the forest school approach, and taking people out for regular sessions in a woodland setting, and it's very much centered about creating community and looking then at how this this learner-led approach resources learners, how nature-based learning can resource learners to become nature guardians, and looking at the skills that a learner develops through a program like something like the Acorn project or any other nature-based learning, where the learner is developing the personal skills of being able to develop connection, to create community, and in so doing so collaborate with others to become nature guardians. And it's through this kind of empowering our learners and our communities to take positive action towards ecological restoration, and doing it in those small steps, acorn by acorn. So thanks very much for listening. If anybody wants to share their little sensory map that they might have made while they were listening to that piece into the chat, I'd love to see them. And I might just go back to Grania now if there's any questions.
Well done, Maura. That was brilliant. I was just taking a picture of my little map, and funnily enough, my river actually connected to my woods in my map, and I didn't even do that consciously. So it's obviously something that resonated from earlier on. The stories are super. My question, and we don't have very long for questions, unfortunately.
Sorry. Yeah.
But one of the questions I had, and I think you kind of answered it somewhat, is I was interested in the stories that you were talking about, the connection, and obviously a lot of those are collected stories that they've collected from their family, and that they're creating even by themselves. But how much do you kind of do you delve into like the folklore commission school manuscript stories or anything like that, or do you just kind of keep it present in the moment?
We do, like we start from that idea of their own personal narrative and looking just to using story to make a connection with their elder and kind of find their own personal connections. But then yes, sometimes we do connect into that and the folklore and what's because some of that will be so alive in communities anyway. But it's always really, I always find it just really interesting when you just go with that kind of open question of what stories matter to people, and you ask people to collect a nature story from their elder. They'll come back with stories about cinemas and weddings, and so it's for me that the beauty is in that we can't separate that human story and nature story. They're one of the same, a bit like the river, they all just flow into one another, really.
Absolutely. That's great.
Maura, that was just lovely, and the recording, just I think that'll stay with people for a long time. It was amazing and a really nice, simple in some ways idea. I had a question that's very practical, and I think it was also somebody else had it in the chat. Is it 4 visits that you do, or are some schools longer, or are you going back to them over the course of a few months?
Yeah, I mean, so we do a minimum of 4 visits, and then sometimes it'll just depend from how the project's been funded, if it if we can extend for longer. Like most schools want more than 4 visits, but and like then we do have schools that have been doing the program and are now in their third year of it, so yeah, we'd hope that would be the plan, to repeat and keep going back. But again, like everything, it's just so funding dependent.
And I just had another question. It was something that you kind of mentioned, and I think we come up against it on occasion in our work. You talked about kind of, obviously the maps and different things that the young people are producing as a documentation and a learning resource. And I get the impression just from what I saw of your work there that you probably do have nice ideas around how that can be shared or displayed, or bringing art and that into it, or is there kind of again, it's probably not a one size fits all, that you do whatever is appropriate for that particular program, but do you have a general way of sharing those resources when they're developed by the program?
I suppose they're there primarily to speak to the learners, you know, that they're that it's a documentation of the learning process and that it's a learning resource for those learners. And we do bring that back in the kind of in the fourth session of celebration, where we try in some way to share with community. So, you know, that again looks different each time. There have been times where parents come along to that sharing, and we've had a gallery in the forest. There's been times where, you know, like you've just heard, the kids have made a podcast and shared their stories that way. So, you know, we're not very prescriptive about it, but yeah, it can take many forms, like sometimes people share the stories, and one school have printed it into a little book, you know, so it's just changes from school to school, yeah, how that learning gets reflected back and shared into the community, which is really important as well.
Absolutely. And there are loads of lovely comments coming into the chat here. Thanking you for such an inspiring talk. Louise O'Neill Vance had 3 questions. So with an eye on the time, I might put 1 or 2 to you. So how would we learn about practitioner teaching and training? And do you have a program for teens, or have you one in gestation, I suppose?
Yeah, we're just about to start our 3rd year of Journey Home, which is, well, this year it'll be 6 months. Last year it was 6 months. It's designed to be a 9-month program that kind of follows from Imbolg to Samhain. And it's a 9-part journey, rite of passage connection program for 13 to 16-year-olds. So that'll be starting whenever we're allowed. So probably around June or May, the end of May. I think, so yeah, that's called Journey Home. We run CPD for teachers, and I mean, there's lots of forest school training programs in Ireland. If you look up Forest School Ireland, and you'll find Earth Force Education. It was known as Earth Force Education, but it's Forest School Ireland now. They run training programs in Wicklow, Down to Earth run training programs in Bridget's Garden in Galway, and I believe that there's I think Kerry is running a training program in Kerry as well. So there's lots. If you look up the IFSA, the Irish Forest School Association website, you'll find links to all the training programs there. And I think there was something about ivy restoration.
Yes, that was the 3rd part.
No, we don't have an ivy restoration program at the moment, or removal of ivy. I'm not sure if it's a funny one, because like that's always something that I think ivy, it's not always, there's a fine line between when ivy starts to harm a tree and when it's supporting a tree. So yeah, I'm not an ecologist. So yeah, I think I'd have to look for expertise in that area. Yeah.
Absolutely.
There was just one quick question further back, maybe more, if you remember, Micheál Marnin has asked the name of the legendary person you mentioned in connection with the Tuatha Danann.
Oh, Dean Kecht.
How do we spell that?
In the chat.
Yeah, brilliant.
Great stories about
not
Dean.
One I heard before, so it's worth asking. Yeah.
He replaced the arm of one of the Tuatha Danann kings. I can't remember the king's name, but he with the silver arm. So there's great stories about Dean Kecht. Yeah.